Eliza James was one of the brightest students in Greenwood Secondary School. Known for her intelligence and charm, she often drew the attention of her teachers and peers. But there was one teacher in particular who made her heart race every time he entered the classroom. Mr. Daniel White, the young and charismatic English teacher. Mr. White had recently joined the school and quickly became the favorite of both students and teachers. His sharp intellect, deep voice, and kind nature made him stand out, and soon enough, the girls in school started competing for his attention. Many girls would linger after class, pretending to need extra help, hoping to impress him. But Eliza was different. She was determined to win his heart. Eliza was not content with being just another admirer. She studied him carefully, observing his habits, interests, and the kind of conversations that made him smile. She noticed that Mr. White had a passion for literature, particularly Shakespeare. So Eliza made it her mission to excel in English class, often quoting lines from Shakespeare's sonnets or engaging him in deep conversations about literature. Every day, she would stay after class, pretending to need assistance with an assignment. At first, Mr. White treated her like any other student, offering help and encouragement. But slowly, Eliza began to blur the lines between student and teacher. She'd laugh at his jokes a little too long, dropped subtle compliments, and even brushed her hand against his as she handed in her assignments. Despite the attention from other girls, Mr. White couldn't ignore Eliza's charm and intelligence. She was always respectful, always kind, but there was something about her intensity that made him uneasy. Still, her academic progress was impressive, and he couldn't deny that she was an exceptional student. As the weeks went by, Eliza became bolder. She would wear her best dresses to school, making sure Mr. White noticed her. During breaks, she'd find excuses to run into him at the staff room, often bringing him his favorite coffee she accidentally overheard him talking about. Slowly, she became a constant presence in his life. But Mr. White wasn't oblivious to what was happening. He tried to keep things professional, reminding himself that she was just a student. However, Eliza's persistence began to wear him down. She seemed to understand him in ways no one else did, and there were moments where he found himself enjoying her company a little too much. He tried to pull away, but it wasn't easy. One evening, after a long day of classes, Mr. White stayed late to finish grading papers. Eliza, as usual, showed up with a question about an assignment. But this time, she was different. Her eyes held a deeper intensity, her words more suggestive. She complimented him on how young and attractive he looked, hinting that he deserved more appreciation than what the school gave him. Caught off guard, Mr. White tried to maintain his composure. He gently reminded her of the teacher-student boundaries, but Eliza was not one to give up easily. She leaned in closer, her voice barely a whisper.
You don't have to fight this, Mr. White. I know you feel it too. We're meant to be.
For a moment, Mr. White was silent. There was a part of him that had grown attached to Eliza's attention, but the rational side of him knew this was dangerous territory. He stood up abruptly, telling her it was time to leave, but Eliza wasn't ready to give up. She had worked too hard to win his affection, and she wasn't going to let go that easily. Eliza made it her mission to win Mr. White's heart completely. She began spreading rumors about other girls who were interested in him, subtly undermining their chances. She made sure to always be the best in class, always shining brighter than the rest. It wasn't long before Mr. White found himself thinking about her more often than he should. Despite his efforts to distance himself, the tension between them only grew. One evening, when the school was almost deserted, Eliza confronted him again. This time, she was more direct, expressing her feelings and telling him how much she loved him. Torn between his professional duty and the growing emotions he couldn't ignore, Mr. White found himself in an impossible situation. But things took a darker turn when Eliza discovered that one of the other students, Sarah, had also caught Mr. White's attention. Unlike the others, Sarah was quiet, unassuming, and had a natural charm that seemed to draw Mr. White in. Eliza couldn't stand it. After everything she had done to make herself noticed, she wasn't about to let someone else take him away. Determined to eliminate the competition, Eliza devised a plan. She began sabotaging Sarah's reputation, spreading rumors that would damage her standing in the school. But when Mr. White continued to be kind to Sarah, Eliza's jealousy spiraled out of control. One evening, in a fit of desperation, Eliza sent an anonymous message to the school's administration, accusing Mr. White of inappropriate behavior with a student. She thought this would ruin Sarah's chances with him. But things didn't go as planned. The message sparked an investigation, and suddenly, both Mr. White and Sarah were under scrutiny. The school, concerned about its reputation, suspended Mr. White pending the outcome of the investigation. The news spread like wildfire, and Mr. White's career was on the line. Eliza had thought she could control the situation, but the guilt began to consume her. She had never intended for things to go this far. All she wanted was for Mr. White to notice her, to love her back. But now everything was falling apart. As the investigation deepened, more secrets were revealed, and Mr. White's life was turned upside down. Eliza's once bright and hopeful world began to crumble, and the consequences of her actions became too much for her to bear. This was just the beginning. Eliza's heart pounded as she watched the chaos unfold at Greenwood Secondary School. What had begun as a desperate attempt to gain Mr. White's love had spiraled into something far beyond her control. The anonymous message she sent had led to Mr. White's suspension, and whispers spread through the hallways like wildfire. Her plan to win his heart was backfiring in ways she never imagined. Mr. White, devastated by the accusations, kept a low profile, avoiding students and staff alike. The once vibrant and confident teacher now seemed haunted, his reputation in ruins. Eliza tried to console herself with the thought that this would push him closer to her, that he would see her as the one person who truly understood him. But instead, he seemed more distant than ever. One afternoon, Eliza gathered the courage to visit Mr. White's apartment. She stood outside, her heart racing, before knocking softly on the door. It took a moment, but eventually, the door creaked open, and there stood Mr. White, his face pale and his eyes filled with exhaustion. "Eliza," he whispered, barely able to hide his shock. "What are you doing here?" "I just wanted to check on you, Mr. White. I know you're going through a lot right now," she said softly, trying to sound sincere. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes scanning the room, searching for any sign of comfort she could offer. Mr. White sighed, rubbing his temples. "Eliza, you shouldn't be here. This situation is already bad enough. I can't afford any more problems." "Problems?" Eliza's voice wavered as she looked at him. I thought we had something special." Mr. White turned toward her, his expression filled with frustration and pain. "Eliza, you're a student. Whatever you think is happening between us, it's wrong. I could lose my career, my life. You don't understand." Tears welled up in Eliza's eyes as she stepped closer. "But I love you. I've done everything to make you see me, to prove that I'm different from the others. Why can't you love me back?" Mr. White shook his head, his face hardening. "Eliza, this is not love. This is obsession. You've crossed a line, and now look where we are. I never asked for this." Eliza's world seemed to collapse around her as his words cut through her like a knife. The room felt too small, too suffocating. She had given everything, her heart, her mind, her reputation, and all for a man who would never love her back. Unable to control the rising tide of emotion, she lashed out. "You don't understand. Sarah was going to take you away from me. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and watch." Mr. White's eyes widened in horror. "What are you talking about, Eliza? What did you do?" "I was the one who sent the message to the school. I thought if I could get Sarah out of the way, then you'd realize we belong together," Eliza confessed, her voice breaking as she spoke. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I just wanted us to be together."